Howdy friendos, my name is Stuart, and welcome to another Spider-Man video! What are we on, like 4 or 5 of these now? Either way, I promise this one will have no real hot takes this time around. This time, we're all in here for good, clean fun. Either way, the intro for this video is going to be nice and short, and I'm sure our MCU expert and video editor Xthedarkone will appreciate that. Even though I even warned him I'm going to go off script a bit, because I wrote this script before I saw Venom 2. Also, heads up, I'm writing this and I'm recording this in October for the D&D videos. Obviously, we'll not be taking into account Venom 2 or anything from No Way Home. Sorry, there's no way I can legally get a hold of that footage. And I'm not going to have my video taken down for Disney bullshit. So anyway, as you all know, Peter Parker is a normal high school kid who is very intelligent, but unfortunately not very well respected. One day during a field trip, he was bitten by a radioactive spider that somehow granted him the powers akin of a spider. Once he discovers this, he realized he could make money from his newfound gifts and entered a wrestling match in order to impress his neighbor and high school crush, Mary Jane. After demolishing his opponent in a wrestling match, the showrunner cheated him out of his winnings. The man is robbed, and as revenge, Peter allows the mugger to leave the compound. Allowing this man to run leads to the death of his Uncle Ben. Peter tracks the guy down and realizes his mistakes, and then dedicates his life to following his uncle's philosophy.
With great power comes great responsibility.
It would be arguable that Peter as Spider-Man is neutral or lawful good, but since he starts the movie as Peter Parker the high schooler and not Peter Parker the superhero, we're gonna give him a nice, easy, true neutral. I know I tend to start a lot of students, teenagers, and kids at this alignment, but I mean, if it fits, it fits. Either way, we got 3 pretty excellent movies to get through, and I'll be lying if I say I didn't have a special place in my heart for all of them. Full bias here, I love these movies, even Spider-Man 3. And with all out of the way, let's go.
The terrifying, the deadly, the amazing Spider-Man!
Stop, please! Stop! Hey! Stop the bus!
Stop the bus!
The movie starts off bullying Peter Parker harder than my players, Xthedarkone, Megami33, and Lady Naraki bully me when I DM. Yes, this is a call-out post. Even the bus driver gets in on it. His best friends even break the bros before hose clause by flirting with his crush. He even admits later in the movie that he always knew about it. He flirts with Mary Jane before getting bit by the spider. Neutral. Peter is bit by the spider, becoming sick and changing overnight. When he wakes up though, he realizes he's gone through a big change. Did y'all notice how he was looking down when he mentioned that? He discovers his spider powers like adhesion and spider sense throughout the day. It should be noted that early on, his spider sense is more instinctual than actively choosing to do anything. Neutral. Peter tries to avoid a fight with his longtime bully. He defends himself from his onslaught, but runs away after the crowd sees his powers on display. Chaotic neutral. After running away from school, Peter figures out that the spider gave him powers and begins experimenting with them. This does mean he forgets his promise to Uncle Ben to help paint the kitchen. Oops, chaotic neutral.
Were you listening to that?
Later that evening, Peter tries to flirt with and bond with Mary Jane after hearing the argument with her dad. He delivers some genuinely good compliments and is being very sweet. Neutral good.
Pretty tight, huh?
Inspired by Flash's flashy car, Peter does amateur wrestling to earn money with the help of his powers. All this to impress MJ and not to help his family, including his recently laid off Uncle Ben. Neutral.
I didn't start that fight, I told you that.
Yeah, well, you sure as hell finished.
Noticing that something is up with his nephew, Uncle Ben tries to talk Peter out of his recent behavior. Ben mentions something about responsibility or power or something, but Peter becomes defensive and outright rude so he can leave. I'm sure this won't lead to anything tragic in the foreseeable future. Chaotic neutral. Peter signs up for 3 minutes of playtime with Randy Savage, and despite the initial surprise cage match, the newly named Spider-Man quips and taunts his way to victory with his spider powers. And no, I won't ding extra for the joke that everyone talks about because it's era appropriate, and Peter figured the guy's ego was so fragile, even teasing about this would send him over the edge, and he was correct. Chaotic neutral.
I need that money.
I missed the part where that's my problem.
After getting ripped off by the wrestling promoters, some unimportant mugger robs the guy. Peter has ample opportunity to stop him, but chooses not to because he
Missed the part where that's my problem.
Peter actually uses this opportunity as a moment of revenge, and because of this, the fact that Peter moves out of the way in order to escape is chaotic evil.
Hey, stay back. Stay back!
Peter discovers that his uncle was fatally injured during a carjacking. Peter stays with Ben, watching him die. Discovering where the carjacker is, Peter goes on a rampage. Rushes after the carjacker with the intent to kill. He smashes his car while it's still being driven and without care for collateral damage. He chases the car to a hideout. Chaotic evil. Discovering to his horror that the carjacker was the thief he had failed to stop earlier, Peter knocks the gun out of the carjacker's hand. Peter doesn't push him out the window, but he does flee when the cops enter the building. He returns home to Aunt May. Chaotic neutral. Inspired by Uncle Ben's last words, Peter decides to use his powers to... well, you know. As such, he decides to become the amazing, sensational, spectacular, and sometimes adjectiveless Spider-Man. He stops crime and doesn't ask for anything and focuses on big and small crimes. Neutral good.
That's nothing to be embarrassed about.
Don't tell Harry.
Catching up with MJ, Peter discovers that she's seeing Harry, whom he's living with in New York. He keeps his word to MJ to not say anything, and also politely declines Norman and Harry's offer to help get a job. Something Norman respects. Lawful neutral.
I was thinking of something in photography.
Peter gets the idea to sell photos of himself to the Bugle and accepts a freelance job with them. Jameson thinks the photos are...
Crap, mega crap.
but gives him the gig, wanting to make Spider-Man a threatening menace or a menacing threat. You could make the argument that Peter is now benefiting financially from his superhero career, but it's practically less than minimum wage, and the newspaper he works for libels, not slanders, him to infamy. Lawful neutral.
It's Spider-Man!
While taking photos at the parade for the Bugle, Peter witnesses one of the Power Rangers, the Green Goblin attack. Peter swings into action and saves people both in and out of costume. Neutral good.
That's slander.
It is not. I resent that. Slander is spoken. In print, it's libel.
After the parade and enduring Jameson's libel on Spider-Man, Peter witnesses the Goblin attack the Bugle looking for Spidey's photographer. Peter suits up to rescue Jonah, but also webs JJJ's mouth shut. Before he can even begin fighting, Peter is drugged, kidnapped, and given the offer to join forces with the Goblin. Neutral good just for all that.
Bye.
I was in the neighborhood. I needed to see a friendly face.
Peter goes to see MJ's audition, even when he misses it. The two talk and bond, but Peter stays behind after seeing MJ being approached by some muggers. He then saves her and then gets some upside-down smoochin'. Neutral good.
But he's still up there!
I'm going.
Peter goes into a burning building to save the occupants inside. Even when the police try to arrest him, Peter goes and tries to save some more occupants in the building, and he defends it also from the Green Goblin's granny, who's out of her mind. The two fight before they escape the collapsing building. Neutral good.
How did you say that happened?
Bike messenger.
Sneaking back into his apartment, Peter avoids detection from Norman for Thanksgiving. His cut is noticed by everyone and Norman flees, ranting about MJ to Harry right outside of the door. Peter does nothing. He doesn't help MJ or anyone as the day falls apart around him. He sits and just lets it play out. So a typical Thanksgiving family dinner here in America. Neutral.
Can Spider-Man come out to play?
Finding out Aunt May has been attacked by the Goblin, Peter stays with her at the hospital, realizing his secret is discovered. He does flirt with MJ in passing, something that Harry sees, and doesn't Spider-Man the entire time. He does realize, however, that Goblin may be after MJ and goes to warn her, only to find out that Gobby got his gal first. Neutral good.
Spider-Man! This is why only fools are heroes.
Peter is given the infamous choice at the Queensboro Bridge to save either MJ or the bus full of children. Peter saves MJ first and then the trolley. Using his strength and endurance, Peter endures multiple attacks from Gobby as he lowers the hostages to safety. He does get some backup from fellow New Yorkers. Chaotic good. Peter gets a savage beatdown from the Goblin. Getting his second win after Gobby gloats, Peter attacks but stops when he hears a familiar voice. Revealing himself to be Norman Osborn, gasp, Gobby pleads to Peter to spare him and help him. Peter doesn't fall for the trap, his spider senses kick in and he dodges the attack which kills Norman. Neutral.
Don't tell Harry.
Dying, Norman begs Peter not to tell Harry. Norman dies, at least for now, and Peter honors his wish. He takes off the Goblin gear and brings Norman back to this penthouse, only to be discovered by Harry. Harry immediately blames Spider-Man for his father's death, but Peter does try to support Harry at Norman's funeral. But Harry is dead set on revenge. Lawful good.
Only a friend? Peter Parker?
While visiting Uncle Ben's grave, MJ comes to confess her feelings. Worried about how she was targeted by Norman, Peter refuses a romantic relationship with her despite wanting it. He's doing this because Spider-Man's enemies tend to target those he loves and he wants to protect her. Let's go with chaotic good since all lights are green on the relationship and he's not telling her the truth as to why they can't be together.
Stop!
2 years later, and Peter is struggling to juggle his life. He loses his pizza job with Admiral Zhao after being late with the delivery. His reputation as Spider-Man is terrible thanks to the Bugle, and he's nearly fired when bargaining with Jameson on photos. He's flunking school and barely able to pay for his modern and extra-large New York apartment, thanks to his life as Spider-Man. Neutral good twice.
Pizza time.
A lot of movie 2 starts with establishing where Peter is in his life too, and he's kinda going through the web swinging motions. His personal life isn't any good right now. Harry, now the head of Oscorp's science division, is tense due to Norman's death. May is trying to help her nephew while her own house is foreclosing. MJ is also tired of waiting despite Peter's continued efforts to keep her distance so she can't be hurt. It's just not a good old time for Peter Parker.
Parker, now I remember you. You're Connor's student.
One day, Peter meets Otto Octavius, a brilliant scientist and one of Peter's nerd heroes. The two begin to hit it off as Peter is eagerly learning about the fusion reactor and accepts Otto's insistence that the numbers are fine. He does also take Otto's advice about work and dating to heart. Neutral good. Trying to make it to MJ's performance, Peter is nearly run over by a bunch of crooks. He takes care of the armed criminals, but misses out by getting into the play by one goofy staffer. He does try to apologize later, but it's too little, too late for MJ. Chaotic good. On his way to help the police after he's unable to see MJ, Peter suddenly loses access to his powers. In the end, Peter realizes he can't help as Spider-Man and goes home. This is just like the Zuko problem. Peter has an alignment switch and the DM just can't help but penalize him. It's a shame, really. Neutral. Peter attends Otto's demonstration, where the reactor begins to destabilize. Peter jumps in to save everyone, including Harry, and he turns the machine off, but not before Otto tries to stop him. This causes the death of Otto's wife, Harry doubling down on his hatred of Spider-Man, and a new enemy for Peter. Not a good time. Neutral good.
At least we get the toaster.
Peter goes with May to try to help her with getting a loan so she won't foreclose. Unfortunately, there are no golf games or Subway sponsor deals that Peter can take to help. Dr. Octopus then comes in to get his own loan, and Peter fights, even as his powers continue to act up. Neutral good. Peter attends J. Jameson III's engagement party to MJ on the behest of JJJ. He tries to talk with MJ, apologizing and even trying to woo her, but she shoots him down. He's also accosted by a drunken Harry for stealing MJ and just takes it, I guess. Neutral good?
I'm Spider-Man. No more.
Losing his powers yet again, Peter tries to seek help. Confessing to his doctor about his friend's Spider-Man dreams, Peter is confronted with the question of why he's trying to be Spider-Man. Even after the ghostly, guilty manifestation of Uncle Ben tries to convince him otherwise, Peter quits being Spider-Man. Chaotic neutral. Peter focuses on bettering his own personal life. He focuses on school and attends MJ's play for the first time. He does also try to use this way to try to talk to MJ out of Mary and John. Despite initially liking the lack of responsibility, Peter sees and ignores a daylight mugging. He didn't even try to call anyone or help or jump in. I'm pretty sure some people in New York just got in trouble for that. That's a misdemeanor at least. You gotta call somebody, I think. Neutral.
He wanted a car. He tried to take Uncle Ben's.
This is so ballsy and so underrated, it might actually be my favorite interaction in any superhero movie ever. Holy shit, how do you respond to that? Peter completely confesses to Aunt May that he is responsible for Uncle Ben's death, reaches out for her forgiveness, completely rejected. Holy shit, thank you, Sam Raimi, for making this scene so good. I know quite a few people who rag on Aunt May for giving Peter a hard time, but what the fuck do you want from her? Dude, if I were in May's shoes, violence would happen in that kitchen. Nat 20 scene. I love this. Lawful good.
Is anybody in that building?
We think there's a kid stuck on the second floor.
On his way home one night, Peter sees a fire going on. Initially ready to ignore it, Peter rushes in when he finds out that people are there. He saves one child, even with his fluctuating powers. Neutral good.
Do you love me or not?
Invited by MJ to talk, Peter apologizes for his behavior despite MJ mulling things over. He tries to deny his feelings for her and admits he was rushing things. Chaotic good, I guess. Interrupted by an oncoming car, thanks to his spider sense kicking in, Peter is told by Doc Ock to fetch Spider-Man for a rematch. Knowing he needs to save MJ, Peter dons his spandex and becomes Spider-Man once again. Neutral good.
Where is she?
Peter and Ock have an absolutely nat 20 fight scene. Holy shit, they're zipping around, Peter's saving people and fighting his former hero. It's fun in creative ways. Even when Ock destroys the brakes, Peter jumps in and, not caring about his secret identity, just stops the train from crashing. It's amazing. Neutral good. Fuck you.
He's mine!
Doc Ock returns after the train has stopped. Not wanting the train passengers to be hurt or worse, Peter allows himself to get knocked out and captured. Lawful good.
First we'll see who's behind the mask.
Unmasked by Harry, Peter drops the facade and shows that he's Spider-Man to his best friend. He asks for Harry's cooperation on where Ock is, despite Harry being understandably furious at Pete. Despite the ticking clock, Peter gets the info. Lawful good.
Dr. Octavius.
Making his way to Otto, Peter fights to stop the fusion reactor from destroying the city. The two fight, and when Otto is shocked back to his senses, Peter pleads with him to stop the reactor. Neutral good. After Otto dies, at least for now, Peter saves MJ and admits his feelings for her, and his fears about endangering her. Wanting MJ's happiness, Peter lowers her down and accepts her impending marriage to John. Lawful good.
Tell her not to open the caviar.
MJ leaves John and decides to be with Peter. MJ proclaims, "Hey, maybe I should be in charge of whether or not I want the risk of being with you." Peter finally relents and the two become a couple. Neutral good.
People really like me.
1 year later, Peter has gotten his life in order and gained positive reception from New York, minus the bugle. School is better and his relationship with MJ is great, and he's even planning on proposing to her. For whatever reason, though, Peter has been unable to clear the air with Harry about Norman's death. Can't win them all. Neutral good. On his way home, Peter is attacked by Goblin-up Harry. Defending himself, Peter tries to talk to Harry throughout the fight, but is ignored. Lawful good. Peter ends the fight by making a web snare line that knocks Harry out. Realizing he's not breathing, Peter tries to save his life and rushed him to the hospital. He stays until he knows how Harry is doing. Lawful good.
Hey, buddy.
Learning Harry might have potentially permanent short-term amnesia, aka anything Spider-Man related for the first two movies, Peter is kind and supportive to his best friend. He even spends time reconnecting with his friends despite some clues that Goblin formula is still in his body. Lawful good.
Go get him, Tiger. Sorry.
When MJ discovers her acting is sparking negative reviews and opens up about how this makes her feel, Peter runs off to go Spider-Man some more. He just sort of ignores MJ's feelings, but it's hard to fault him for this at first since it's the condition of the relationship and they haven't really talked about it yet, so neutral good.
It's Brock, sir. Edward Brock Jr. I work at the Daily Bugle.
Peter saves Gwen Stacy from falling to her doom and comes face to face with photographer Eddie Brock Jr. Learning that Eddie is trying to snag a staff job and boot Peter out of the Bugle, Peter accepts Jonah's competition against Eddie. Lawful neutral.
You know, I guess one person can make a difference. Enough said.
Peter eagerly accepts his key to the city. He goofs off for the crowd and even goes along with kissing Gwen, even knowing MJ is in the crowd. Peter, dude, chaotic neutral.
Jig's up, pal.
Spotting the Sandman, Spider-Man leaves his ceremony to stop him. He does save the guards and tries to stop his new rogue, but has trouble taking him down. Neutral good.
Sorry, I have to go.
Where are you going?
Please don't follow me.
Peter sets up his dinner date with MJ to propose to her, unaware with how unhappy she actually is. He tries to play off Gwen not being serious, but in the end is left alone to be serrated by Ash from Evil Dead. Chaotic neutral.
No, I have no intention of settling down. This man killed my uncle, and he's still out there.
Called in by the police, Peter is told that Flint Marko, the Sandman, has confessed to the death of Uncle Ben. Enraged, Peter demands that Flint is captured. He begins listening to the police radio non-stop, ignoring offerings to help and support to get revenge. Chaotic neutral.
Where am I?
So let's talk about the symbiote. Unlike the Tom Hardy version, this incarnation of Venom doesn't seem to have a personality, simply latching onto anything that it can survive and bond with. It does amplify emotions from the host according to the movie's exposition. As such, the symbiote won't be considered its own character. It technically does become a thing at the end during the final fight, but whenever Peter wears the suit, we'll just give him double movement for the time being.
It seems to like you.
Discovering himself in the new black suit, Peter tests out his spider powers. He goes to Dr. Kirk Connors to test samples and get his input. Neutral.
Remember Ben Parker? The old man you shot down in cold blood?
Following a Sandman sighting, Peter rushes out and takes the black suit. Spotting Eddie, Peter breaks Eddie's camera and rushes after Flint. Finding him, Peter begins to attack Sandman with no remorse. Slams Flint's head into the oncoming train upon realizing his water weakness, throws a pipe, seemingly killing him. Chaotic evil.
It's like a poison. It can take you over.
Removing the suit after Flint's death, Peter tells May that Spider-Man has killed Flint. He's stunned by May's horror and tries to put distance between himself and the suit. Neutral.
Look, you see?
Getting a call from MJ, Peter is horrified when she breaks up with him. He tries to salvage the relationship by trying to propose to her. When he confesses to Harry, he learns just how much he's been missing, none the wiser that Harry has regained his memories and is lying about him and MJ getting back together. Peter leaves, stunned by everything. Neutral.
Protected you in high school, now I'm gonna kick your little ass.
Feeling isolated, Peter puts the suit back on and confronts Harry. The two fight, breaking everything around the high-rise. Peter is done trying to talk with Harry, even taunting his former friend about being a disappointing son. When Harry throws a pumpkin bomb at Peter, Peter dodges and throws it back, injuring his former friend. Chaotic evil.
Looks very, similar.
Discovering Eddie has created a fake image of Spider-Man stealing, Peter goes to the Bugle and then reveals the truth loudly and publicly. He pins Eddie against the wall and ignores Eddie's pleas before leaving in a huff. Although Peter is clearing Spider-Man's name and securing his job, he did not have to body Eddie to do it. Technically chaotic evil. After taking care of all of his enemies, Peter enjoys his time in the suit. He begins flirting with multiple women, ignoring Kirk Connors' warnings of the symbiote, and acting like a jerk. Chaotic neutral. And no, it's not an @1 scene. Shut up. This is hilarious.
Now dig on this.
Peter shows off to Gwen where Mary Jane works. He literally only does this to hurt Mary Jane's feelings and doesn't even care when Gwen is rightfully offended by this. Eventually, this sparks a bar fight, and I remember when this came out in 2007 that the entire theater gasped when Peter hit Mary Jane. You're doing something right when that happens. So I kind of have to give this a Nat 20 scene for showing just how far Peter has gone. Seriously, Nat 20 scene. Chaotic evil. Horrified by his actions, Peter realizes the dangers of the suit and tries to purge it. Through hard work and a church bell, Peter is able to rid himself of the symbiote. Neutral good.
I heard her, Aunt May. I don't know what to do.
Admitting how he's messed up, he confessed to his aunt what he's done. He tries to give the ring back and says he isn't ready. Taking responsibility. Lawful good.
Harry. She needs us.
When MJ is captured again, this time by Sandman and Venom, Peter suits up. Knowing he's outgunned, Peter asks Harry for help to save their friend. Even when Harry says no, Peter goes solo to save the day. Lawful good.
Never wound what you can't kill.
Peter tries to talk with Eddie to work things out, trying to save him from the suit. Even when he's being attacked by Venom, Peter tries to save this creep. He's saved by Harry and the two tag team against Sandman and Venom. Lawful good. After Harry is fatally wounded, Peter uses sound to separate Eddie from the symbiote. Peter pulls Eddie out before trying to kill the suit. Too bad Eddie just doesn't want to let go and dies from an effective pumpkin bomb. Neutral good.
We always have a choice. You had a choice when you killed my uncle.
Sandman, witnessing Venom's death and seeing Peter unmasked, tells Peter the truth about Ben's death. Despite all the initial rage, Peter listens to Flint's confession about the accidental death. Despite knowing he doesn't have to, Peter forgives Flint and lets him go. Chaotic good.
Who said those things?
None of that matters, Peter.
Peter stays with Harry as he dies. He apologizes for everything that he's done to him. Neutral good.
It's the choices that make us who we are. and we can always choose to do what's right.
Peter and MJ remain mostly distant from each other after everything that's happened. They reunite at the jazz club, but whether or not they decide to go back to being a couple or move apart is unknown, at least for now.
With icy frigidaire, and I mean to care for no one.
I'm gonna put some dirt in your eye.
Honestly, at this point, there isn't much I could say about Spider-Man that hasn't been said before. I will say that this is still arguably my favorite standalone version of Spider-Man as far as the movies go. Obviously, Tom Holland is probably the best Peter in terms of working with a large shared universe, and he could pull off cool, dorky Spider-Man as well as cool and confident Spider-Man. But I really appreciate Tobey's version as the everyday kid who's just doing his best. And to address my comments from my Miles Morales video, and yes, even Xthedarkone has messaged me saying he doesn't agree with me in that. I still say Miles is boring compared to Peter because of exactly how average and how normal of a high school kid Peter was.
That is false.
Once Peter had access to spider powers, the first thing he does was try to monetize them with the wrestling match. And then when he got revenge for being ripped off, he was given karmic punishment for not doing the right thing. Peter's selfish actions led to the death of his uncle, which set him on the path of the hero. So to reiterate, Peter's selfishness is what got a loved one killed, and because of the blood that he feels is on his hands, pushed him to be a hero. Miles, again, did everything right and his hands are completely clean when it comes to his uncle. As soon as he figured out that he was Spider-Man, he jumped at the opportunity to be a hero because he was inspired by the Peter Parker of his universe and he felt that it was his duty to do it. Now, contextually speaking and following the rules of the respective universes, Miles' hero's journey was fine and very fitting and it's still a very good movie, but his morale, get it? Choices are a bit more boring compared to the trauma that Peter faces. Never said Miles was bad, it just said it's boring compared to Peter. And that's all I really have to say on the matter. And I think by the time this Spider-Man is published, No Way Home should be out in theaters. I'm sure there's plenty I missed and there's plenty that's going to change. So be sure to tell me everything I got wrong in the comments down below, and I'll see you all next time. Thank you so much.